Good evening and welcome to episode number 32 of the Eve Prosper Market Show. I'm your host, Lockefox, and we're here to talk about the Eve news and the Eve market for the last week. So without further ado, let me go ahead and get right into our show news. As always, if you want to follow the show, all you have to remember is Eve Prosper. That will get you to Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, the blog at eveprosper.com, and the Patreon at patreon.com/eveprosper. If you want to support the show, consider becoming a patron at patreon.com. The contributions mean a lot to me and the rest of the team, and it helps get this show out and produced and helps pay the bills and keep the lights on. So thanks again to all of our Patreon subscribers. On that note, though, I want to announce that we're going to have Eve Prosper will be on hiatus until September. That isn't to say we will have no shows between now and then, but we may not be running live streams. I expect to basically reduce the show to 07 coverage and pre and post patch coverage as it makes sense. I will continue running our tools to get a weekly look at the market, and if there's something particularly interesting, we may publish a blog or we'll push some information out to you guys if there's something of note. But this time of year is traditionally a bad time of year for MMOs, and there are a lot of schedule conflicts coming up between vacation time and new projects at work. And I'd like to take a chance to go work on some of the underbelly of the show, working on some of the code. Feel free to enjoy the summer. We do keep tuned to YouTube and Twitter and join us on the Tweetfleet Slack. We will be producing some content, but it won't be the weekly show. So, and to everyone who is a patron, I invite you, we did put out an email to all the patrons, advising them about the hiatus, and we will not have our feelings hurt if you need to change or cancel your contribution for the time being. We do understand. Why don't we go ahead and move on to the news? First piece of news, if you haven't been paying attention, is that the Fleet Warp mechanic change got an update. They teased on the 07 show that they wanted to reduce the options for fleet warping because it's too easy to drop a fleet on your target, and it severely skews the meta towards short range things, and also it's become, in their opinion, too easy to run bomber fleets, too effective for the meta. So the changes have been delayed. They were due to come out in Aegis in a couple of weeks, but they have been moved to the yet unnamed August 25th expansion. The changes mean that you will be able to warp to mission locations, bookmarks, though bookmarks will have a delay for new bookmarks, so you won't directly be able to use new bookmarks, fleet members, and existing broadcastables, as they put it. The thing you cannot warp to is probe results, so you won't be able to have an FC dual boxing and dropping fleets with his boosting T3 with his Nomad set. Well, not Nomad set. I don't know what the probing set is off the top of my head. So I'm sure that this is probably set mostly in stone at this point. Feel free to stop by Reddit or the forums to voice your opinion if you are still not happy about the changes. In other news, the EVE Alliance tournament the schedule has been announced with all of the team slots locked up. The schedule is out on the EVE news site. I'm not going to break it down. I really should have tried to pull the brackets together, but I didn't have time. I am excited for this year's Alliance tournament. I really do love the Alliance tournament. It's one of my favorite events. So And I hope that we will be able to do some either commentary or best 5 matches of the weekend kind of review with an expert panel. Marcel Devereux over at Aderon Robotics has been crunching on a new tournament viewer for the point of being able to display it up on the stream. So keep tuned for that. As I have information, you'll get information. And then the last couple pieces of news is the big one that came out, I believe, yesterday or the day before, is that the EVE monetization policy video monetization policy was clarified. Now, if you have been following the EULA for any amount of time, when it comes to monetization and some of the projects that have been destroyed because of RMT schemes and that kind of thing, I don't think the rulings are a surprise, but the ruling did have us delay the giveaway that we'd been announcing for a few weeks. I need to do the draw. Entries are closed, so that's over, but I need to get people the plexes they were promised. I was waiting for this to get clarified so that I didn't end up, getting banned and not being able to do this show anymore. So the long and short of it is no gating content behind a paywall, which isn't news if you remember EVE is Easy, at least their first incarnation. And no special bonuses for paying members. So no PLEX giveaways only to Patreon subscribers, no bonus tickets in the giveaway because you're a Patreon subscriber. None of those. Everyone has to have a fair chance. If it's free, it's free, and there's no paying to play kind of thing. So again, I didn't think it was particularly news because it's reinforcing a position that CCP has held for a while. But that came out. It stirred some pots. Lastly, if you watch the EVE blogosphere at all, you may have noticed that the blog banters, a monthly topic for EVE blog discussion, has been moved from Kirith Kodachi's Inner Sanctum of the Nineveh to Drakern's site, Sandsider and Spaceships. I'm always a big fan of the blog banters. I don't tend to write a lot of them because, well, I'm an expert at one rather specific thing when it comes to some of the frillier out there things. I'm not really gung-ho about writing a bunch for them, but I love the writing prompts, and it's great to see other players put in 2 cents about it. So if you're a blogger or an aspiring blogger, go check out the blog banters now over at Sandsider and Spaceships.blogspot.com, I believe. With that, all of the news out of the way, let's go ahead and move on to PLEX. And PLEX, I had said last week that I didn't expect us to really get above 950, excuse me. And we've since lost a little steam. I kind of expect that we might rise into 950, maybe 960 with the upcoming patch, but I think the general trend we should see for the next 6-ish weeks is a very minor deflation. So keep an eye on the price. Personally, I'll be watching for something like a 900 mil buy-in point. I do believe that in the fall we will hit a billion-esque Plex. I think it's a matter of time. Just we'll hit it late October, early November-ish time is when I expect it. We might even see it, actually, with as high as we are, we might just see it by the end of August. But it's a historically low time. As Rippard Teg has put it, it's the summer doldrums, so I expect things to stay flat or very weakly down. If we look at the 1-year view, we can see that the slope is kind of expected. We're matching the slope we saw last year about this time. But then during the summertime, we saw general flatness until we got back into the fall around October. Again, I expect the same looking trend. I expect a pretty big dip around the Alliance tournament. We might see it go all the way down to 900, sub 900 during the Alliance tournament. But I expect it to stay stable for the next 6 weeks. Now that I've made a prediction that's strong, the market will prove me wrong. But if it does, then I'll write up a thing about it and say how bad I am. Moving on, if we look at the buy and sell spreads, it looks kind of like some downward pressure is here. The buy margin here is pretty wide. The general trend for the last week is slightly down. Again, this is, I don't think we'll see a lot of deflation, a lot of sink, but we will see a slight price decrease trend over the next few weeks. Though, a beacon of good news is if you had invested in the multiple pilot training certificates, like I told you to about a month ago, we're back at parity with PLEX. And I have a hard time believing that we will see the added margin over PLEX return anytime soon. But the advice I said last week still stands. If you're in it for the short game, now's the time to sell. If you bought in nice and low at the 800 mark, I would be gunning for a billion-esque a unit, and I think that billion-esque will be in October-ish. So if you're willing to wait that long for your payout and to go cash these out, I think that's the long game to play here. Now, I've been wrong in the past, so please don't skewer me, but that's what I would do if I were invested in this. Moving on to minerals, things are going to be kind of boring. Tritanium is still pretty weak. We saw it dip below 5.2, but it has since recovered. Again, this is sort of a trend I expect to see, that we should stay around 5.2 for the next several months, until nullsec really comes to grind. We won't really see big waves in the mineral markets. Pyrite, again, we saw some weakness and a price reset to 11 straight. We're seeing it slump a little bit more. We might see it come down to 10.5. Again, I still think the trend is holding. I don't think there's anything exciting to talk about here. Mexilon, again, is staying extremely stable. We're in the sub 45. I will reiterate my prediction that if you believe that it's a reasonable expectation that super caps are on the balance board by the end of the year. And if you believe that news will be good, then Mexilon is a great bet to be making. I don't think the prices are going to go much lower. I mean, we could go all the way down to 40, but 40 versus 45, I don't think you're going to lose a ton of. Okay, it's 10%, but I think your opportunity is that you're going to buy in at 45 or 40, and it's going to jump up to 80-ish. So that's my prediction, but I could be completely wrong. It could totally tank, and Eve could be dead forever. So those are the two options here. Isogen, we're seeing that it dipped pretty low, almost to 100, but has since recovered to about 105. Again, expect it to stay flat. It might dump down back to 100. I expect it to stay in that 100 to 105 band for the upcoming future. Noxium, again, is just bouncing between 500 and 550. We're seeing it hot on the weekends and cold during the weekdays. No reason to think it's going to get out of this band. It's a little high right now, so it might drop below 500. That might be a decent chance to buy in and wait for it to come back up to 540-ish. But that's kind of a wait and see if that actually comes true. Zydrine is interesting. So it has been reasonably stable, and the problem that the reason this looks different from previous weeks is that we're finally seeing the rebalance wash out. So we've gone from the 800 or whatever, the 500 or 800 level we were at months ago, is finally washing out of the out of the system. And we've been climbing up. We've gone from about 1,200 up to 1,500. I believe that this has to do with the burn Jita, burn Amar. Just a constriction in supply because smart producers stayed home. I don't think this is damage done specifically, but the hint I have about burn Jita, burn Amar is that expect this upcoming weekend raw material markets to crash. So it's going to be a great opportunity to buy in things like minerals, like moon products, the advanced materials, and especially the T3 materials. Because the focus was on Amar this year, that puts particular pressure on products coming out of wormholes. And I think that's going to be a great place to be investing in the upcoming weeks. So the strategy that I would tell you guys is to buy next week, hold for up to 2 weeks, and then either put it into production to produce the new item at a higher margin, or just sell the raw component. I'm partial to production. I love production. Prices are particularly high, and if you have Zydrine to sell, this weekend is going to be your best bet. Like, you should be stopping this stream and selling right the hell now. Same story goes for Megasite. We've been at 2,000 for the last few weeks, and we're climbing north towards 2,500. We're up into high unstable territory. Same advice as Zydrine. I expect prices to come down this weekend with the ganking pressure off. I expect those prices to way overcorrect. So Megasite sub 2,000 might even get down to 1,600 during the event, during the weekend. So keep an eye on these materials. And lastly, again, the one I hate predicting is Morphite. I had said last week that I expected this bubble to have been popped, and that to expect us to hit back down to 10K, just a ripple down to 10K, but we're still seeing a lot of pressure trying to keep it up at 14K. Again, I think this has to do with supplies coming out of wormhole space, with constrained supply thanks to burn Jita, and I expect the floodgates to open this weekend as people rush in. Now, I did write the article for the Matani.com, so they may just be doing a second week of burn Jita and Amar waiting for this kind of advice, but the traffic is so low right now, I'd risk it. So, call me a goon spy. And last, before we move on, let's look at the general spreads. Again, we're seeing a wide spread on the growth on Megasite. This is showing instability. Same thing for Zydrine. We're seeing the buy orders falling already. Also, we saw a bubble pop in Isogen, and things are still unstable in Morphite. Like, again, according to buy orders, it's hard to sustain a price above 11K, but the price keeps spiking up to 13 or 15K. So keep an eye on that. I expect prices to drop pretty significantly, though. Moving on to fuel. Fuel isotopes continue to do what they've been doing for weeks. We're still seeing that weak upward pressure thanks to new reaction passes coming online. We're still seeing hot prices in helium isotopes. Again, I think these are artificial, and this bubble should have popped already. I expect that to come down pretty hard. Everything else has stayed stable where you expect it. So fuel blocks, again, are following the underlying trend. I think that Amar fuel blocks jumped up a little too high for its price. It should be far closer to the 16K mark, but it's since corrected and it's coming down, and I think it's going to come down hard. So that's what we're seeing in fuel markets. Now moving on to the outliers. Again, we're going to start outliers where we started last week, where we talk about the moon markets. And I had said when I saw Morphite spike that this was going to be a great signal for moon mining. It was a great signal for Tech 2 that Tech 2 producers were churning up in preparation for the FOSSI changes. And again, it's complicated. So we're seeing some spikes come out, like the photon. We saw a bunch of the metamaterials spiking the last few weeks. We saw some particularly low items like ceramic fibers and phenolic composites reset their prices to something more reasonable, but they are losing ground. We're seeing some huge spikes in things like ferrite carbide, which again, I think this particular spike is just an anomaly. But on the other side of the coin, we're seeing huge drops in the high ends of the advanced materials, like fermionic condensates, we'll talk about in just a minute, have taken a huge nosedive. They've lost like 10% or 8% in the last couple of weeks. We see, but we're seeing, things going both ways. We saw hypersynaptic fibers peak up, but it's lost most of its momentum and it's back down at 9K. So you win some, you lose some. I still think it's a decent bet. I think that as FOSSI rolls out and as the first rounds of the new SOV fight happen, I think this is going to become more interesting. So it's still a buy in my book, but it's going to take more patience than I was expecting. And like I said, if we look at fermionic condensates, it is in the basement. Thankfully, I don't think it's going to fall much lower, so there's some good news. But I don't know where this dump is coming from. The volumes aren't particularly high. I don't know if it's just someone incompetent trading or it's a liquidated supply. I'm really not sure. I didn't see anything else to really show why this should be. And phenolic composites, again, we're seeing where it reset to 1350 where it was before the big drop into the 1200. And now we're almost back up to 1500 again. So phenolic composites, not a bad bet for the time being. And then ceramic fibers, we saw a big spike the last week, and we've seen it lose momentum back down to 220. I'd hope that this would be able to keep its steam up to 240, but again, we'll have to see. It's one of the cheaper things to produce, so it's hard to keep it at a stable high price without somebody tanking it. Another one we've been watching that I've brought up several weeks in a row is dysprosium. That's a R64, and it had been at a rather historic high of 90K, and it just kept going up and up and up, but has since been losing momentum over and over again. And I think this might have to do with either Imperium liquidating stocks or not as good management with the new people in the South. I'm kind of surprised to see the price keeps falling. I don't know where the floor particularly is. It looks like 65K is really the floor of this thing, according to the charts. But the charts and what the charts say and what Eve does are not necessarily the same thing. So I can't expect it to fall much further, but I could be proven very wrong. So we'll keep an eye on this one. Moving on to, I believe this is a Tech 3 item, and if it's not, feel free to yell at me in the Twitch chat. Neurovisual input matrix, which I believe go into Tech 3 destroyers, had peaked last week, had peaked a couple of weeks ago and has been falling. And again, I'd be watching for 2K as a buy-in point for this. This goes into my prediction that Burnamar and Burnjita just constrains the supply and it keeps people home for an extra week, and then they come to market with 2 weeks worth of stuff and they flood the market. So that's the prediction. I think this one's this one's my canary in the coal mine this week. We'll see after the dust settles if I was right or wrong. Moving on to PI materials, coolant and mechanical parts have been on a tear. We saw them bottom out. Coolant at 7K has been climbing up to 8K, which is great for low-end PI guys. Mechanical parts has gone from something in the 7250 range, all the way up touching 9K. So that's some pretty huge growth. I think it's unstable. I think we'll be back down. This again might be some of the burn Jita thing going on. We'll have to see for a couple of weeks. It's really hard to tell here if it's getting consumed by fuel or if it's just constrained supply. So I need a couple more weeks to tell you whether this one's if the good times are here to stay or not. Moving on to ships, the Rifter has been interesting. If you remember back when we looked at minerals just a few minutes ago, all of the minerals have been tracking down except for a little bit of growth in the high ends. Rifters are mostly low ends, to be honest. I don't even think they have any Zydrine or Morphite in them. And they are climbing astronomically. We've almost doubled in price. We've gone from about 35K per unit up to 55K per unit. So, okay, not doubling, but still a pretty respectable bump. It looks like there has been a buyout resetting the price. And usually what happens with buyouts, though, is that it peaks and then it slumps. Not really sure what's driving this. I don't know if it's somebody buying out for a new piece of null meta. It's hard to tell where it's going. It's just interesting that it's climbing so high. So it's a good chance to go crank out some Rifters for the weekend, get them sold while the getting's good. It should be easy to crank out 100 of these. I'd have to go double check the numbers, but it should be easy to crank out a few dozen of these and get them out to market in the course of a day. So this is a definite buy-in my opinion. I expect this to fall pretty quick though, so be quick before things go south. Moving on, the next one that popped up was the Astarte. This is a command ship, the Galente command ship, and it has been relatively stable, but it looks like a recent popularity spiked the price, and we may have seen some overproduction come to market. So if you're in the market for one, I know they are a particularly weird ship to try and fit into a meta, especially versus something like the EOS. So I was kind of on the fence about bringing this one in, but they're low price. If you need one, now's a great time to buy. I wouldn't invest, though, because the volume is particularly low. Another one, this shouldn't surprise anyone, is the Catalyst. We saw it spike during the Burnhamar event and then come back down to 14K, or 140K, excuse me. And no, I think it's still going to fall a little further back down to its parity point, especially if the Imperium guys go and liquidate their backstock for resupply. I expect this to actually rebound much lower. So I'd be watching this one for a fall sub 111. Moving on to the Cerberus, we brought this up last week that it had spiked particularly high, probably on the news of the new missile items, but has since come back down again. I think this is production meeting the new supply. I'd have to double check the numbers, but it looks like we're getting back down to a relatively stable point at 200 million. Not really sure that the ship itself has not been brought up as a particular platform. It's still mostly a short-range ship. It's still shield-based, which means that it's kind of susceptible to bombs. It's a great small gang kind of ship, especially with rapid launchers, but it doesn't reach outside of its meta very well, in my personal opinion. Whereas you might want a Drake, or you might want a Raven instead for that kind of missile projection. But that's my 2 cents. We'll see where it goes in the upcoming weeks. The Talos, again, this shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. We saw it very popular during the last weekend. Expect this to come back down. I would expect it to overcorrect, so watch out for that trough. Should be coming up in the next few days, maybe by Tuesday or Wednesday. Just keep an eye on this. It might be a good chance to buy in when it overcorrects. another interesting one, which is doubly interesting ahead of the supposed drone nerf, is the Dominic's Navy issue. When the nerf information came out, the price went up. So again, I'm not really cued into the meta at the moment. It's been a particularly busy few months, and I haven't been out in fleets like a good fleet member. So, not really sure what's going on here. It looks like we're almost back to normal. If you have some Galente loyalty points, it might be a good chance to cash out, but that window is closing fast. Out of ships and into the Gecko, which has been on a tear, and I actually cut this out of last week's episode, so everyone who watched live got to hear the blooper where everybody corrected me. They aren't allowed in the Alliance tournament, but they still are a popular drone, and they're still not getting any more of them. So I still think it's a pretty decent investment, especially with the recent drop down. I have a hard time wanting to pay more than 60 million for them, but that's because I'm stingy, and I'd really want to get them in sub 55, but that's because I'm stingy. Another interesting one, and I really shouldn't have brought this up, but I thought it was cute, is Cooking with Veldspar is very cheap right now. It's almost free, so if you needed a copy, go pick it up at your local bookstore. Cooking with Veldspar. Moving on, the Dreadgarista's drone amplifier was featured in the drone nerf announcement, and though the exact bonus is coming down, it looks like people might be looking to upgrade from their T2, might be looking to fill the gap in their Ratting Ishtar with some faction goodies. So if you have the means to get one, go get them. But the prices are going up, and I don't know when they're going to stop. So that's where we are with the Dreadgarista's drone amplifier. And then the last one for this week, just because it's weird that it sticks out, is the Synth Blue Pill Booster. This is, I have published a infographic about drugs, and I really should go repost it so I can go reap my own karma again. Synth means that you can use it in high sec. You can move it around high sec without it being illegal. But it also has only like a 3% bonus. And blue pill means that it's a shield boost amount, and that's local reps only. It doesn't count towards remote reps. It's interesting to see them pop up. I kind of expect them to fall back down, especially versus the other synth blue pill booster. I can't pronounce that corporation. Neogimi? I can't remember how to pronounce it. Where it gives a 5% versus the 3%. So, just thought it was interesting, but that's because I like drugs. So, with that, we're gonna conclude the show where we usually do in the prediction review. Just one last quick look at jump freighters. We mentioned that a few weeks back that there was this big drop off in the prices, and they haven't rebounded, which is a little bit weird. I know that the volumes are so low that it takes a bit of time for bad trends to wash out of jump freighters. God, do I know? I've watched them so freaking closely. I freaking hate these things. So again, I still think that most are a buy. The Anshar and the Ark are particularly good buys, especially if you have the patience for buy orders. We're seeing the Nomad get a little bit of steam back, and the Rhea still remains pretty flat at 6.5 billion. So again, I still think they're reasonably good buys, sub 7 billion, but I don't know when the prices are coming back. Oh, and especially the Anshar. The Anshar is still pretty freaking low. If you need a jump freighter, you're not going to get a better price than right now. Another one I brought up last week, because I expected to actually rebound by now, is the Flycatcher. Had been historically stable at about 50 million, but is now at 45 after a particularly hot tear. So I think it's undervalued at the moment. I think it's a pretty decent buy rating still. But overproduction might leave this in a slump for a couple more weeks, so keep that in mind. indicators say it's turning around any day now, but any day now could continue out an extra week. The hyena was another one I brought up last week. We saw it fall, come back up with a little bit of overcorrection. I still think it's slightly high, but I'm pretty sure the action is over. Again, we're seeing this sort of ripple pattern is one that I particularly look for when I'm messing with these. Is that we saw it overcorrect down, probably because of overproduction, and then overcorrect back up again. But I think we're gonna stay stable at the 17-ish million mark. Another interesting one that I should have seen last week, but didn't, was the basilisk. And again, we're seeing a similar pattern, but just not as low a trough. We saw a big spike. Looks like just some constraint in the numbers sold, and then a ripple as people came in to try and capitalize on that high price. Again, the indicators say the prices are going back up again to 200-ish million, but I don't really believe them. I think we're going to stay stable at this price for another couple of weeks. The Cinnaball is another one I've been bringing up. It had peaked and is falling again. I think it's going to be a decent time to buy in, but again, it's not a very popular ship, so it's not really a great moneymaker if you're going to go trading. Oh, and then the last one I brought up last week, which I thought was weird, was the Prime, which is a special edition ship. It's for doing PI stuff and moving around PI colony items. It's not particularly useful because it gets outshined by a bunch of other ships, but it's a special edition asset, so it's kind of worth watching. Looks like the action was a pretty decent buyout, resetting the price, and then trickle back down as people are fighting back to get it back to normal. So I think the action's over here. I have a hard time believing we're going to go back up again, but it's a special edition asset, and, it can't get much worse. So I would keep an eye on it if you are the low and slow kind of guy. So that should wrap up the show. Thanks again for everyone who tuned in live. Again, this has been the Eve Prosper Market Show, and I've been your host, Lockefox. If you want to follow the show, all you have to remember is Eve Prosper. That will get you to Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, the blog, and our Patreon. I'd like to once again remind people that we will be on a hiatus for the upcoming few weeks up into September. We will still be doing pertinent coverage around 07 shows and patch releases, but we will not be having a weekly show. If you want to keep up to date on exactly what's going on, be sure to follow the blog and the Twitter. Those are the best places to get information. Also, if you are a patron of the show, we do appreciate the support, but do know that we will be doing less content, and we will not be heartbroken if you have to adjust your patronage. If you do want to support the show anyway, who am I to tell you no? It is supremely appreciated. It does help keep the lights on. This show is not free in neither time nor talent nor money to produce, and your support means a lot. It actually does help get the show produced. It pays for hosting and getting the guys who contribute code paid, and it helps keep the lights on behind the scenes. So if you want to contribute, feel free to stop by patreon.com/EveProsper. But with that, I'm going to end the show here. This has been the Eve Prosper Market Show, and I've been your host, Lockefox, and I will see you on the next show.